All right, let's welcome to the podcast Dr. Debbie Mercer. Dr. Mercer has served in the Dean's position for the College of Education at Kansas State University since June 2012. Beginning her career as a preschool teacher, she has also taught in Kansas rural public elementary classrooms and a school library media center. Her higher education experience includes university teaching and administration. Specific areas of interest and expertise include teacher recruitment, preparation and retention, children's literature, and the use of technology. Providing leadership in the area of assessment and accreditation, she has led the development and implementation of assessment systems to document effective candidate preparation for teachers and school personnel. Dr. Mercer holds a PhD in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in reading and English as a second language, MS in curriculum and instruction with emphasis in reading and language arts, as well as a bachelor's degree in elementary education and family and child development, all from Kansas State University. Dr. Mercer, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm excited to visit for a while.
Yes, and we're excited that you're here too. Excited to do this interview and have our listeners get to know you a lot better. And I have to say many thanks to Dr. Melinda Anderson, the Nakata Executive Director. Melinda scheduled this podcast interview and was going to be part of it to help me guest host, but unfortunately wasn't able to make it. So Melinda is here in spirit with us, and I look forward to having her back on as a guest host real soon. So Dr. Mercer, we like to start out each of our podcast interviews, asking our guests to talk about your journey, your path. What led you into higher ed and where you're at now.
Right. Well, it definitely was not a straight or linear path. My grandmother was a school teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. Actually, was underneath what is now Tuttle Creek Lake. Tuttle Creek is a huge man-made lake in Kansas, and when they put the lake in, my grandparents had to move the farm. I say it worked out well because they moved south of Topeka, and my mom met my dad there and lived happily ever after. So, thank goodness for Tuttle Creek Lake, right? But she was a teacher. I consider myself a first generation student because I was the first person in my family to go to school. But interestingly, when I was a junior in college, my mom started to college, and she did concurrent credit at the community college that was offered at our high school site. And she began working on her degree in education as well. So I say I come from a long line of educators, but again, not a straight path. My first degree is in family and child development, and I taught at the preschool level, and then really wanted to work with students that were a little bit older. And so I had the opportunity to go back. I needed to earn a second bachelor's degree, thus 4 degrees from KState. Again, not a linear path, but earned my elementary license and taught kindergarten. Had the opportunity in a very small rural school to also be the library media specialist. So I did graduate work in that area. And that really allowed me to work with students, 5 years old through seniors in high school. And so I had a wonderful experience in that small rural community. And then began working on my doctorate degree and went to a regional teaching university and really thought I'd spend a couple of years there and ended up really liking and enjoying what I was doing. I was teaching children's literature to mostly elementary prospective teachers, and then started doing a lot of work related to assessment and accreditation. Wound up being dean there for 5 years, and then had the opportunity to come home, and truly Kansas State University is my home. And so have been dean 10 years, starting my 11th year as dean here at K-State, and this is definitely a special place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of your time has been in education. You've gotten to work with so many students from all ages. And like you were saying, K-State's very special to you. I mean, you've gotten your degrees from K-State, so bachelor's, master's, PhD. You work at K-State. What makes K-State special to you?
Well, K-State is the first operational land grant university under the Morrell Act. And so from the very beginning, the mission of K-State has been to serve, to provide access to education and to really support and enhance the communities in which we live and work. And that's so close to my personal philosophy. I often use the word impact, and impact drives me. How can we best impact lives in a positive way? And I've had some very strong mentors along my path, and many of those came from right here at Kansas State. So each time I needed to increase my knowledge base, add skills, think a little deeper about something, I turned to K-State, and they were there for me. So there's a culture on our campus that I think is very unique and very special. So if you stood in the middle of campus and randomly asked people that were walking by to describe our campus, you would hear words like, well, we believe in purple, our main school color, we're the Wildcats, but you would also hear words like family and community and care. And so, just little things happen on our campus, like people wait to hold the door if you're coming along behind them. There are greetings routinely, even if you don't know someone. It's just that culture where people visit and they take care of each other, and that's students as well as faculty and staff. In fact, our students developed their own philanthropic arm because they saw that students were having to drop out of college when something happened that they couldn't overcome financially. It might be they needed help paying rent one month, or their car broke down. They needed to get home. The paycheck was gone, and there was a need there. And so they began fundraising and have their own distribution method as a way to help students over those rough spots. Not tuition and books that come from scholarships and grants and loans, but those other expenses that occur as part of life. And I think that's an example of the kind of culture here at K-State. So it's truly a wonderful place to work. When I was being recruited to come back to K-State, I had a longtime faculty member say to me, Debbie, we don't always agree, but we always get along. And that type of culture doesn't happen overnight, and it takes nurturing and really reinforcing to make sure that type of culture stays alive. But I found that again and again in discussions within the College of Education, that there are respectful ways to put a difference of opinion on the table and out as collaborative colleagues. And so that's pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about a lot of these like little things, like whether it's someone holding a door or someone you're remembering something someone said, and it stuck with you. I know I've worked at KState San Bernardino for now going on 18 years, and I remember things that happened when I was a student, and a lot of it wasn't necessarily something I learned in class, but it was something that I learned from, or I just remember, how someone was, and being able to keep that relationship and be friends with them and just be have a lot of joy for where I work. A lot of those things, I still have in the back of my mind, and I can still reference to anyone if I need to bring anything up. So definitely totally agree with that. Now, as Dean of the College of Education at K-State, we were talking about before we started recording that like some people might have the same title, but have way different job responsibilities. So like, how would you describe your position and your day-to-day?
So ever changing, right? And that's part of what appeals to me. So a great deal of my focus is on vision and strategic planning, so that the college is positioned to be as strong and as impactful as we can possibly be. Kansas State University is very decentralized. And in a decentralized model, there's a great deal of autonomy and responsibility placed on the deans. So I've served where I didn't have that kind of autonomy, and more decisions were made centrally. Within the college, I'm responsible for all hiring. I'm responsible for my enrollment management. I'm responsible for my technology. I'm responsible for our communications and all of our social media. And there are resources centrally, but those college level decisions all fall on me. So our college is somewhat unique at Kansas State in that I'm pretty evenly divided undergraduate and graduate students. So most colleges have many more undergraduate students than they do graduate students. I don't know that I'm atypical for a college of education, however, because most teachers greatly value education. Um, it, Graduate degrees help them move across on a pay scale. They might add specific areas of licensure, but pretty evenly divided, about 1,200 students at both levels. And then also unique about our college is most of our programming at the graduate level is delivered online. So we have a long history of distance delivery. Our geographic footprint, our geographic responsibility is very large, essentially the western half of the state of Kansas. And so we have long had faculty driving to remote locations to offer classes. It was a period of time we chartered planes and we'd put faculty on a plane because Garden City was 5 hours away, and it was much more efficient to use an airplane. Now, of course, we use Zoom or some type of video conferencing, and of course that increased greatly during the pandemic. But even pre-pandemic, we had a strong foundation of distance delivery of courses. And so again, at the graduate level, most everything is online, except for some of those courses that accreditation mandates that we do face-to-face. And we have, for example, some school counseling courses where they're doing group skills and practicum development, those types of things. And so those are still face-to-face. At the undergraduate level, our elementary education program is entirely online, as well as entirely on campus. So that distance focus and the online digital focus has long been tradition in our college, and has just grown over the course of the decade that I've served as dean.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit more because, like, with the College of Education, you've had numerous initiatives, using technology from, there was like the iPad initiatives in 2014 to having open or alternative textbooks, to faculty grants. Do you think K-State and the College of Education have kind of always been ahead of the curve when it comes to technology initiatives, even into now being in 2022?
Absolutely. One thing that really changed my personal thinking was the arrival of my first grandchild. And so at 4 years old, Cadence had an iPad. So yes, she could turn the pages in a book because we read together frequently, but she could swipe with the best of them. And when she was 4, I thought she's going to be in a kindergarten classroom next year. Is the teacher ready for this group of students whose brains are wired differently than ours because they've always had this technology? And equally so, are they ready for the child that has never had an iPad in their hands? And they're going to have both types of children in their kindergarten classroom. And so that really led to discussions within our college. And so we began a one-to-one iPad initiative. So as students were admitted to the College of Education, we checked out an iPad to them. And that was at a point in time when an iPad was about $800 a device. So they've definitely come down in cost over the years. But we wanted to level the playing field because we knew, just like that kindergarten example, we had the same types of students in our college classes preparing to be teachers who next year was going to have My Cadence K in their kindergarten classroom, right? So we issued iPads. Faculty did a lot of professional development and learning and began using the iPad as a teaching and learning tool in our methods courses. So that was a huge step. Then we went another step and said, textbooks are so incredibly expensive and they're slow to change because it takes time to write and then publish and print and then get those to the bookstore. And by that point in time, there could be a 2-year lag. So faculty, I began a faculty incentive grant, and faculty that wanted to put together their own textbook resource for students could do so and earn summer salary dollars for doing that work. Then in turn, that was pushed out onto the iPads that the students had, and faculty could update those literally in 2 hours if they needed to. They found something that a typo or something that they didn't quite like, or they had new information that they wanted to add. They could do that just on an ongoing basis. So that was a huge benefit. The other huge benefit was the amount of dollars we save students in book costs, because textbooks are so incredibly expensive, right? I mean, some upwards to $200. And so our students have collectively saved about $2 million in those electronic resources that were pushed out to their iPads. And then, of course, we have the physical environment in which we teach. So we work hard to ensure that we have cutting edge technology in all of those rooms, sometimes similar to what they're going to step into when they walk into their first classroom. And sometimes it's pushing ahead of the curve so they can teach their school about something new that is very recent and very impactful. So technology has always been very important. I feel like we pushed the limits there, and that was very evident when the pandemic hit and we had to say to faculty, get what you need out of your office. We're shutting down Bluemont Hall. We're closing Kansas State University's campus. Everyone is at home, but learning needs to continue. So our faculty that had given up paper syllabi years previously and all had we use Canvas or their Blackboard, whatever their learning management system was, all of the handouts were already digitally available. They were used to being videoed and to capturing lectures and class discussions and pushing that out. That our transition in the pandemic, while stressful, was also very smooth. And that wasn't the case everywhere across our campus for teachers that had only taught face-to-face and hadn't had those opportunities to really use technology and push it in new ways. So we learned a great deal during the pandemic, right? We learned that some students kind of thrived in this online environment where they had more autonomy over their schedule. And we also learned that some students really felt isolated and alone. And so I think we're bringing that learning back as we envision what does the future look like, because it will be different. We know that. We're living in that now.
Yeah, we're definitely living in that change. And let's talk maybe a little bit about the pandemic of sorts, because we're halfway through 2022. We've been writing all these different changes, shifts in priorities, a lot of different conflicting priorities that are competing priorities, I should say. A lot of demand on staff and faculty. So as dean, how do you ensure that your staff and faculty are heard?
Absolutely. So we have a strong faculty governing structure within our college that is very, very important to faculty and to me. So we have a series of standing committees um, that tackle specific issues and then bring that before the entire faculty assembly. So that's one very strong route. We had all during the pandemic, of course, meetings were via Zoom. We became very proficient at using that. Zoom weariness became a real thing, right? It was often exhausting, but we're learning what do we pull forward with us. And so students were seeing some real behaviors from them. I mentioned our elementary program was online, and at one point we advised those groups of students differently, whether they were online or face to face, because they tended to be very unique cohorts of students that chose one pathway or the other. Now what we see are students ebbing and flowing back and forth between the delivery modes that make sense for their life. So it may be one semester they are entirely online, another semester they're entirely on campus. They may need to move home for a semester. They may have a work schedule that they need to accommodate. So this course that's only offered in the evenings, they take that online because it frees up time to do other things. So we're seeing some real shifts there in students. With faculty and staff, I think we are in the middle of a dilemma, and that involves remote work. So we learned that a great deal could be done at home. And we also know that there's business that needs to be taken care of on campus because we have students face to face. So our advisors, for example, when they were at home, the work day between 8 and 5 became very blurred, right? Because a student would want to have an appointment at 7 o'clock at night. That's when they were available and free. So we had to kind of look at, what does that look like? You can't start working at 8 o'clock and work still, straight through and still be meeting with students late at night. But students like the ability to be able to text their advisor or email their advisor or get onto our advising system and set up an appointment because they thought about it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so providing those conveniences while we don't lose that human touch, whether it's with students and their delivery mode, students and their advisor and access to support structures, or faculty and staff, is a dilemma that we have to figure out as we move forward. Some faculty want to be all online and work remotely. Others really need the interaction and need people, and they want to be on campus. But there are duties and responsibilities that could look different. And so how do we ensure equity? And so we're kind of struggling with some of those questions, and what does that look like, and how do we ensure again just that equity, not only across the college but across the entire campus, when someone with a similar title and a similar set of job duties has very different ways of interacting and going about that work. So yeah, I think it's a societal issue that we're wrestling with right now, and I look forward to working through those challenges, because I think at the end we can come up with a system that maybe isn't, I'll use the word intense and all demanding as what we had in the past, where we did have people working 12, 14 hours a day in an office, and it was just almost a frenetic pace. So we gave each other permission and provided grace to kind of step back a little bit during the pandemic, and self-care became a mantra instead of a negative word. And so I hope we can continue that grace as we move forward through these processes.
Yeah, it's definitely a continued conversation. So I appreciate you being so honest with that answer, because yeah, it's something that pretty much all institutions are going through somewhat. So I wanted to kind of go back, and because one of the initial questions you had mentioned, like scholarships, like student scholarships, and more specifically, I want to talk about student teacher scholarships, because I know that's super important to you and to your college. Because I think from what I read, you said something along the lines of like, there's a story to be told about student teaching, from the long hours that they have to do to the workload to the numerous pressures. Can you talk more about the student teacher scholarship initiative that you have?
Absolutely. So student debt is it is a burden that doesn't leave my mind as we think about preparing teachers. So in Kansas, the only way someone can obtain a teaching license is from a 4-year accredited school, and that's different in other states. But in Kansas, you must hold a bachelor's degree. And so increasing scholarships for students has been a long-term goal. When I started, we were disseminating under $200,000 specifically from the college to students. Now we're pushing 700,000, $750,000 annually in scholarships. So that's something we've talked about a great deal, and our donors have been very responsive to. But much like other professions where an internship or residency is practicum is required, we require a full semester in some programs, a full year in other programs of student teaching. The vast majority of our students are employed in some type of capacity, either on or off campus. And when they need to be in the school from 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, that really limits the number of hours that they can work, because not only are they in their student teaching classroom that amount of time, but then they're preparing in the evening for the next day, either preparing lessons or grading materials so that they can disseminate those back to students. So we knew that the number of hours available for them to work greatly lessened while they student taught, at a time when we knew that there were increased responsibilities. And so that story of student teaching and the stressors during that semester really resonated with our donors. And so we started a student teaching scholarship that has continued to grow in dollars, and that is just for that time that students are student teaching, hoping to relieve some of that financial pressure that they feel during that semester. So it's been very well received. And in fact, many of our donors have stories to tell of their own student teaching semester. One donor that was particularly generous said she remembered buying 5 cans of Campbell's tomato soup at 5 cans for $1, and that was her lunch every day while she student taught. That was what she could afford, and that's what got her through, was that 20-cent can of soup. So she was saying, if I can help someone else have a little bit more varied nutritional meals, she wanted to do that. And so it is something that really resonated with our donors and continues to grow. My long-term goal is to be able to scholarship every student teacher that we have at Kansas State during that semester, and again, take that financial pressure off.
Yeah, that's truly amazing, and yeah, let's make that goal happen. And one of the other initiatives too that I read about was regarding like how you've led the college's concentration on international education and outreach. And I think from what I saw, that was one of the programs was Go Teacher, so a contract that trained 3,000 teachers in English as a foreign language. Can you talk more about that initiative?
Absolutely. So, reaching out to our international partners has allowed the college to grow in very powerful ways. The program you just mentioned was actually with the government of the country of Ecuador, and their president really wanted to foster a bilingual culture within the entire country. And he felt strongly that the place to do that was to begin at the elementary school and be able to offer curriculum in both languages, and that would be the fastest way to grow a bilingual population. And so both Spanish and English were taught. They would send teachers to the United States, and we oversaw all that, had large numbers right here on Kansas State's campus. They would study, and then they would go back. But it didn't just end there. When they went back to their classrooms in Ecuador, annually we send a team to Ecuador. They would go into classrooms, observe, evaluate, encourage. And so it really became a back and forth learning experience for us as well as for them. We've also had groups from Saudi Arabia. I had the opportunity to take a group of students to Zayed University in the United Arab Emirates, partly through a Nakata connection. So anytime our students can travel abroad, or students from other countries can come to Kansas State, it's just an enriching experience for all of us and a learn-win situation.
Yeah, 100%. And you were mentioning Nakata, and I think, we can't have a podcast episode without talking about Nakata. And, you have been one of the number one supporters of Nakata. What makes Nakata so special to you that, you give your time and your energy into the organization?
Sure. Well, I use the word impact to describe what pushes me in the College of Education, and I think that word is very fitting to Nakata as well. That often down to the individual level of impact, where you see change in someone's life because an advisor was there at the right time with the information that was needed to allow a student to take that next step. So Nakata's been at KState for a very long time. We're on our third director of Nakata, and it has just continued to grow and change in powerful ways. So we all know and love Charlie Nutt, right? And my first year as dean, Charlie and I both tell this story. I don't tell it with my face getting red, but my very first annual conference as dean, where I needed to be there on time, and I was looking forward to welcoming everyone to the conference. And my flights were delayed. I didn't know if I was going to get in on time. And so I text Charlie, I'm stuck in the airport. I'll get there just as soon as I can. Here's my timeline. I'm running down to the minute. Debbie. And in a couple of minutes, I get a text back from Charlie. Debbie who? Question mark. Well, he's engrossed in 1,000 details, right? And people coming at him everywhere. I wish people could see us both laughing. Debbie Mercer, your boss. And so we laugh about that on an ongoing basis. But Charlie is a dear friend, and he was a phenomenal leader. And Nakata grew under his leadership from just a couple of thousand members to upwards of 15,000. So huge growth. And with that growth in numbers of members came growth in services that Nakata provided. And all of those initiatives arose out of member need. And so how do we make an impact? So Melinda has been on staff for a little over a year, but of course a longtime Nakata member and very, very involved in a variety of ways. So she was certainly no stranger to Nakata when she took over. But one of her major strengths is as a systems thinker and providing structure. And that's really what she spent this first year on. There was this time of immense growth, and now do we have the structures in place that we need to support an international organization with 12, 13, 14,000 members? And then the pandemic caused us to step back and say, okay, some of the things we were doing were so needed and we need to do more of that. And what are we doing that maybe isn't as needed now? And how do we best use our time and resources as an organization as we come out from underneath this pandemic? And so, of course, conferences are a big part of that, because pre-COVID, conferences helped financially sustain Nakata, and they were this wonderful, I call them almost a family reunion, right? Everybody is so glad to see each other, and they're so supportive, and those connections deepened, and networks were strengthened, and new relationships were built. And so that's such an important part of the culture. And we had to step away from that for a couple years. And so now, how do we build that back up in a way that stays true to those strengths and ensures that people feel safe and feel comfortable coming back into those environments? And so I know those will be some of the conversations as we move forward. And I hope everyone is looking forward to Portland, and I hope we have a large group there ready to engage in very deep professional learning and strengthen those connections with each other, because that's what makes Nakata what Nakata is. The members and what they bring to the organization. We learn so much from each other.
Yeah, and we got a glimpse of that last October when we were able to have the in-person conference in Cincinnati. So it shows that Nakata can definitely have a safe in-person conference and also still have the virtual components as well. So yeah, we definitely look forward to that Portland conference this October. And as we wind down with the interview, this podcast episode is being posted in mid-August, which is close to when many semester institutions start back for the new academic year. Do you have any words of encouragement or anything you'd like to say to the higher ed community as they start their new term?
Well, I love the energy that students coming back to campus bring in the fall. It's just an excitement and a renewal. We come back refreshed. We're ready to propel ourselves forward. And so I say, capture that wave and really celebrate this, because for the first time in 3 years, we're coming back to an environment without restrictions. So last year we were still talking masks, and so we think about our seniors, our juniors, our sophomores, all began their college experience with some type of pandemic-related restriction. And hopefully, if numbers don't continue to rise and we see some pockets of that happening, we'll be able to come back without those restrictions. And so I think a challenge that we all have is making sure that students feel connected, and that those gathering places on campus are populated, whether that's a student union or a library or an area within an individual college or unit. Because we're establishing new behaviors for everyone, for all of our students and for ourselves as faculty and staff. And then I frequently say this, but whatever rejuvenates you, whether that's spending time with friends or being alone, reading a book or going out to eat, exercising, going for a walk. For me, we have horses, and that's the weight of the world comes off my shoulders then. So whatever that is, I encourage each person to find that and carve out time to do that. And that is so important. And that's something the pandemic taught me is it's okay to step back. It doesn't mean I'm shirking my responsibilities. It doesn't mean I'm not getting things done, but it means I'm paying attention to what I need. And then I know I'm much more rejuvenated, much more mentally present for all those that need me to carry on the responsibilities that I have. So whatever that activity is, find it, identify it, and then carve out time to do it.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And last question I have for this interview is I heard that you co-wrote a book called K-State and Alphabet Journey Across Campus. Can you tell us more about that book and kind of the inspiration behind it?
Absolutely. So we've talked about 4 degrees from K-State. My love of K-State is very evident. Dr. Lotta Larson is also on the elementary education faculty here at K-State. She also has the unique distinction of 4 degrees from K-State. We said there are so many wonderful traditions and spaces on our campus. Both of us shared a love of children's literature, and we said let's write this alphabet book. And so we did. Realistic photos are throughout, so people recognize those iconic buildings and different places on our campus. um, we talk about our football program. We talk about the dorms. We talk about our international students. So it does just walk through each letter and highlights special things that are unique to our campus. So that was a joy. And then just this past year, Matt, I had a donor asked her to write a book about the original Bluemont Bell. So, of course, K-State started out as a private college in the 1860s. Um, a bell was commissioned, came first by train and then by covered wagon to Kansas State's campus, hung in our administrative building for quite some time, and then was replaced with an electric cauldron. I had a faculty member and their family had the bell removed from the very top spire of Anderson Hall with a crane, had it refurbished, and it hangs outside the education building. And she wrote the story behind that bell. And so it's listen and you will hear the call. And that call is often symbolic to the work that we do, whether we're an advisor, a teacher, or a label I would give all of us is that we're educators, right? And we have that call from within us to help others, to impact others, to support others. And I think there's nothing more noble than we can do other than to impact a life positively.
Love it. Yes, we all have that and we all have that call. So, Dr. Debbie Mercer, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today.
Absolutely my pleasure.